the difference between augmented reality, virtual reality, and mixed reality? It is a range of experiences. On one hand, we have virtual reality, which is a total immersive experience where you put on a headset and you are disconnected from your environment. Everything you see and interact is a 3D generated object. And on the other hand, for augmented reality, you have a connection to your environment, like in HoloLens, and you have some extra information, maybe 3D or maybe audio information that's available to you, which is augmenting your reality. Also, we have mobile phone applications like Pokemon Go. You are looking through the glass of your phone and you're able to find 3D objects in the real world. And this whole range of experiences we call mixed reality. And short, it's called XR.
Well, thank you for being here with us. Thank you very much to attend the Global XR Conference. My name is Anesio Neto, and I'll be your moderator today. The session is titled StereoKit, a code-first approach to the MR development. And it's going to be presented by Nick, and let me see if I pronounce it correctly, Klingensmith.
Pretty much it.
Reality Academy lead engineer at Microsoft. And hey, don't worry, we will have a Q&A session for you right after the presentation. If you put our questions in YouTube and Discord as well. And well, Nick, the stage is yours.
Great. Thank you so much. Really excited to be here. And in particular, I'm very excited about StereoKit and sharing that. So can you all see my screen? Yes. Okay, there we go. So StereoKit is a project that I've been working on for the last 2 years or so. This is something like I'm really excited about this because it solves a lot of the problems that I've had with development. So a little bit about me. I'm Nick Klingensmith. I'm from the Microsoft Mixed Reality Academy. I'm the engineer for the team. And I basically come from a pretty weird background. I do a lot of game development. I was a professional game developer. I was a teacher for a long while. And I even do photography on occasions. But so my main responsibility at Microsoft has kind of been going around helping customers with their projects, making the ecosystem better for developers, shipping tools, things like that. And so StereoKit, it kind of falls very much into this category of thing. It's a mixed reality engine that's code first, and it lets you make mixed reality applications really, really easily. Like that's entirely what it's designed for, and it's really good at it. Let's see. So one of the things that I kind of discovered pretty early on, like I actually came from a lot of C# and XNA before getting into Unity. So I had like this love of C# and a love for some of these lower level things. Like I love Unity for game development. But once we get into like looking for something that's maybe a little more familiar, a little more lightweight, something along those lines, there wasn't really much within C# that I could just like dive into and make something cool. So StereoKit is this kind of lightweight mixed reality toolkit that lets me do some of these things in a much simpler fashion. So here's like a little highlight reel of some of the features that you can do, things that you can do with StereoKit. Each of these clips that you're seeing here is just like a small scene. Like they're probably like 20 to 60 lines of code a piece. And it's just kind of a sampling of some of the different features that it supports. So it's a mixed reality first environment. So it has like these access to hands, like really easy, trivial access to hands that it does user interface really nicely. These are kind of like built-in user interface things that are very standardized and very trivial to do. I'll show you a little bit about how that works later. It does stuff like loading assets at runtime rather than compile time, things like that. So it's got a whole pile of wonderful things in here, like that just work right out of the box. Like none of this is like in an add-on or like you have to dig around and write a lot of code for. Like all of this stuff is like these tiny, short little examples of code. StereoKit behind the scenes is powered by OpenXR. This is really what made StereoKit possible. Is just being able to like write it once for OpenXR and just have it run everywhere. So right now, StereoKit runs on Windows. HoloLens was my very first platform. It runs on Android. Quest is a really big, important thing for me. And it even runs on Linux. I've had a surprising number of Linux people who really love to work with StereoKit. And so pretty much any OpenXR-enabled runtime that you can imagine, StereoKit works there. So it's very, very cross-platform, which is really nice. And speaking of OpenXR, like this, I did want to mention this a little bit and why like I even started this. Like I first ran across OpenXR back when Microsoft did our 0.9 runtime, like a little bit before 1.0, kind of a preview sort of thing. I was really excited about it. I had just gotten off of writing docs for the Azure Connect. And so I was into this native code environment. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to give OpenXR a try, write a little tutorial. And I boiled an OpenXR application for HoloLens down to basically 700 lines of code. Like this was DirectX, this was OpenXR, and application code in C. And so it was one file, 700 lines long, really short, as short as I could get it. And it compiled and deployed to device in less than 5 seconds. And this was the HoloLens. So like I could compile the code and get it onto the HoloLens in less than 5 seconds. And if you're used to game engines, like that's mind blowing. Like, I mean, you could do better than 5 seconds, but not with any tool out there already. So like that was magical to me. Just this really fast ability to iterate, to like just try something out, deploy it, have it run on the device in context. It was amazing. And I basically looked at that and I looked at the deploy times that I had been suffering through. Like I did some spectator view stuff, and it was basically like 2 or 3 hours for 2 or 3 different builds on like iOS and Android and HoloLens and whatever. And it was just like, yeah. So 5 seconds with was a breath of fresh air. And I basically decided that I wanted to build on top of this and take advantage of this really fast deploy time. So like StereoKit, like it's a little more complicated than the 700 line code, but it does still deploy in like 10 to 40 seconds, which is still a total game changer for being able to iterate. So when tackling this project, I did kind of sit down and say, okay, I need to put some rules in place because tackling like a mixed reality engine is a big deal. Like, how do I make a mixed reality engine that is valuable to people and that I can achieve with a small amount of resources? Like right now, StereoKit is mostly myself. Like I've written probably 95% of the code. And I've only recently started getting contributors and helpers. So I really had to bootstrap this, get this off the ground with a low amount of resources. And so I came up with some rules and scoped it appropriately. And so here's kind of like the rules that I went through. And these rules kind of also illustrate why StereoKit is really valuable. So the first one is that it's mixed reality focused. StereoKit only does mixed reality. And this means that it's very good at mixed reality, but it also means that if you're trying to do something that's not mixed reality, then you might have to go elsewhere. It's probably fine. But it does add like so much benefit for those people who are making mixed reality applications. So like when you look at it, like all the user interface is volumetric. It integrates tightly with 3D models. You always have access to hand tracking. Like even if you have a mouse and keyboard or controllers, StereoKit will simulate hands and give you some tools to make that interaction a little nicer. But you always have access to these things. It's always mixed reality first the whole way through. Along with that, it also ships with tools for building interactions and interfaces. So like these interactions are basically built in. Like it's a single line of code to do some of this like bounding box things. The radio that you're seeing over there is a mix of a GLTF with a number of user interface elements embedded on top of it or inside of it. And so it's really easy to do this type of thing with StereoKit. And of course, like you may have seen the video there and said like, oh, it's all VR. But HoloLens was my first platform for StereoKit. And so it's very, very much integrated with augmented reality functionality as well. So things like scene understanding, eye tracking, QR codes, stuff like that. Like these are all core elements that just work. And I mentioned the hand tracking stuff. This is kind of what it looks like when you have different types of hands. Like on the right side, you see the mouse. And this is basically like if you load it up on a computer and you want to run it in like a flat screen for development or testing or whatever, the mouse still works as a nice hand. I spend a lot of time making sure that the simulator is an enjoyable experience, but it's a completely articulated hand. Same thing with like Windows mixed reality controllers or any other sort of controllers. The grip buttons and pinch buttons and stuff like that all map to certain hand poses. And so you can animate between those. I've had Leap Motion support since day one. And like they have an OpenXR layer and it works really well with that too. And then, Quest hand tracking, HoloLens hand tracking, like it does very, very well with hand tracking. I made a very big bet on hands as the future of our interaction, and I think it's really paid off quite well. Second tenet was to keep the API simple, keep the experience for developers really simple. Since I come from a teaching background, I understand what it's like to learn all of this stuff. Like part of it is like maybe you're a new developer to mixed reality. Maybe you're a new developer, period, and so these things kind of need to be really simple. Like it shouldn't be complicated. If you're trying to make an application, you're trying to make an application, not like a mixed reality interaction toolkit. That stuff has to be taken care of for you. And so like, here's kind of a look at the code. Now, you don't have to read the code, but what I want to illustrate with these examples here is just how like small these things are. Like this top one here, this is an entire application. This is the entry point of the application, and this is all of the StereoKit code you need to have, like the core logic loop, the application itself. Like this is it, and that's gives you this particular experience up here. You get these hands, you get the environment already, and we're just drawing a GLTF model right there. Like it's really, really simple. It's just these really short pieces of code. Similarly for user interface, user interface is a super common thing. Like you just need UI. And so I spent a lot of time with the user interface. I found some of the API designs that really click with me very well. And so I have an immediate mode GUI system here, and it is super short. Like UI.button, and you have a button. Great. If UI.button, do a thing. It's like making user interface with this sort of system is just such an enjoyable experience. And I think if you try it out, you'll enjoy it as well. But basically, super simple API. Now, I did mention that StereoKit is a code-first API, or code-first engine. And there's a couple of advantages here that aren't necessarily immediately obvious. A lot of people will look at code-first things and say, well, I really like having an editor around. I enjoy having that. But I'll tell you, like the vast majority of projects that I've worked on, the editor has only ever gotten in the way. Like most of the time, like your scene is procedurally assembled or dynamically assembled, or like you don't even make stuff in the scene. Like it's all code anyhow. And so in those cases, when you start having this mix of different stuff, like you've got a game object in this hierarchy, like these objects have relationships between them in the hierarchy. Like it may have like multiple different components on it. Each component has properties embedded in it and links between the different objects. Like these are all non-code application behavior, design, architecture, and it's not discoverable. So if you are a traditional coder and you're using things like go to definition, find all references, these don't work in that environment because these references are no longer code, they're data. And most of these engines don't really have good tools for exploring these relationships well. In addition to having something that's code first, and kind of what I'm trying to illustrate here, like this ruler that you're seeing, this is just a piece of code. Like this code right here is that entire ruler. Like, you can copy this code, you can email it to somebody, you can message it to somebody on Teams, you can embed it in a forum. Anybody can then copy that, paste it into their project, and go. Like, it's not some sort of asset package collection of different meta objects and scripts. Like, it's just a piece of code. And so the advantage of having this code first thing is that it kind of consolidates a lot of your development into a single place, or at least gives you the ability. You can still write spaghetti if you want to, but it at least provides you with the ability to, create something that is complete by itself in these smaller packages. Along with simplicity, you also need to be able to learn the thing. If it's simple, it doesn't matter if it's not documented well. And so StereoKit is, from the very beginning, documentation is a core feature. And I spent a lot of time, I wrote a complete application for documenting StereoKit. Basically, what I do is, in my test project, I embed comments with markdown syntax and a little bit of extra flavoring. So basically, when I run the test project, it actually generates screenshots. It scrapes out code and embeds them into a document. And this document then gets turned into the website. So when you look at the website, all the screenshots are live from that version. All of the code is guaranteed to work because it had to compile in order to pass the tests. And basically that means all of this stuff is then up to date as well. So like any refactoring that gets done also gets applied to the documentation. So documentation is great. I've spent a lot of time on it. Pretty much all the major features have documentation samples on them. There's a few things missing here and there, but most of the common ones are good. And I generally try to release more documentation than features every update. So it's something that's always going to be growing as well. I also, like, if you find a spot that's not documented well, you can always just like file a GitHub issue, and I typically prioritize those very highly. So I love answering questions. Please ask questions. Another interesting thing that I tried to do here, I did this for 031, and I would love to do this again. It takes a little bit of time, but basically for this one, which I took all of the major features that I had added for that update, and I built an application that showcased all those features. And so like you can go through that project. It's on GitHub, it's open source, and you can peek through and see exactly how that application works and how all the new features are used, which is fun. I want to do this more often. We'll see if I have the time. Making it fun. I don't know if you can tell, but I kind of like things that are fun. And when you are working with mixed reality, honestly, all of this stuff should be fun. Like mixed reality is just, if you aren't having fun, like something is wrong, right? Like this is such a cool field. It's such a cool topic. Like it should be fun. And if it's not, your tool is broken. And so like I use StereoKit to make all sorts of interesting things all the time. Like I love doing these little prototypes of either user experience or like technical. I really love generating procedural terrain and wandering around in it. Like it's so much fun. So like for me, people enjoying their development experience with StereoKit is kind of important to the library for me. So it's a little bit of a hard thing to metricize, but I pay attention to this. Now, StereoKit is not really, like I don't call it a game engine. I call it a mixed reality engine. And this is kind of on purpose because we already have a couple of game engines, like those are great. If you want to make a game, maybe go over there. What I really wanted is something that was good at building applications, like normal experiences that are not necessarily like these graphical experiences. Just like I want to make a tool, or I want to make an app, or like I just want to make a thing. Like we don't have enough tools in mixed reality. Like mixed reality is so good for like flow work and focus work, like VR especially. The ability to cut off your environment and just like hyper focus on one thing is such a superpower that people aren't taking advantage of quite enough. So I really wanted to make sure StereoKit was good for making applications. And so one of the this actually has ramifications on the architecture of the engine too. Like if you're designing something for applications rather than games, you build things very differently. One of the big things is the asset pipeline. So with a game engine, typically your assets get compiled in advance into these intermediate format. It tends to be optimized and compressed or whatever, stuff like that. But it also means that in order to get an asset into your application at runtime, you don't. Like, you basically have to go recompile your application again. Or if you do want to, if you need to, then you basically need to write your own asset loader yourself or find a third-party asset loader. So StereoKit, the whole asset pipeline works at runtime. Like, you can load up anything at runtime, and StereoKit will eventually optimize it for you. It also comes with built-in file pickers. Like, a file picker is just one line of code in StereoKit, and it's cross-platform. It has fallbacks. It uses the native file pickers when they're available. Like, this is kind of like a first-class concept. Like, I want people to be able to work with files. Like, it's important for productivity applications, you know? So yeah. Also, the very first project that I typically point people to, this is called StereoKit Inc. And it's basically like a little painting application. Like, it's 300 lines of code, but it's an entire content creation tool. It's not complicated. I set it up to be readable and educational more than feature complete. But basically, you can paint things, you can change your brush strokes and colors, you can save it to a file, and then load it from a file. You have a really basic undo redo system, stuff like that, you know. So I really kind of tried to dig in with this application rather than games concept for a lot of the material and architecture. User interface. Another big difference between games and apps. No two games have the same user interface. And so game engines typically have these extremely flexible, oh, my camera just went out. Don't mind that. So game engines typically have these extremely flexible user interface tools where, you know, basically you can create anything. It's really flexible about what it can and can't do. But at the same time, it also makes it really difficult to like create something that's standardized or create something quickly, because there's a lot of stuff that you have to invest in. And so StereoKit kind of goes the other direction. It has a fairly standardized user interface with like a little bit of customizability. Like I've done my best to make it customizable, but it still kind of adheres to these common standards and behaviors. Like it looks predictable, it looks familiar, it behaves in a consistent manner. And so like this is kind of what you want for, you know, an application. It's also really, really easy to make this user interface. So like, you know, instead of spending a lot of time like assembling prefabs and placing them in weird whatever, like StereoKit just has an automatic layout system or a manual layout system, and you just kind of like one line of code, one UI element, stuff like that. So it really allows you to create user interface quickly and consistently. But you can also kind of go nuts. Like here's a little game I did make. It's kind of like a corridor running sort of game where you basically have these little obstacle areas, and you know you kind of have to dodge through the obstacles. But basically, I needed a level editor for it so that I could design these levels. And so, you know, I went through the tools that I had created for making user interface elements, and like this is about a day's work. Like the whole level editor I created in about a day, and it allowed me to place the environment stuff all down, like define the length of the corridor, create and modify block layout, stuff like that. And so like it is a really flexible system for doing all sorts of different things. While it does kind of adhere to standards, it is still quite flexible at the same time. So kind of cool. Performance by default. So this is, I think this is my last tenet that I really like double clicked on. But one really big issue is that a lot of people come in and they're not graphics programmers, you know, like I love doing graphics programming, but not everybody is good at that. And really you shouldn't have to be. It's a complex subject. It's a giant rabbit hole. And for game developers, it's kind of expected that you have at least some level of graphics knowledge, because you have to navigate these waters. Like you have to know about like what on earth is screen space ambient occlusion and why would you use it and what is the cost for it. And you know, if you're new to this stuff or you're coming from enterprise or something like that, you shouldn't need to know that. So StereoKit by default, like everything is set up properly for mixed reality. My target platform is HoloLens, so it's this mobile constrained device. It runs on a battery, like it's displaying a lot of pixels, once for each eye. So it's doing a lot of work, and it has to be doing it quickly. And StereoKit does all of the right things right out of the box. It's actually kind of hard not to hit the frame rate targets with StereoKit, which is really nice. You really have to be doing something silly in order to get StereoKit to slow down. So like all of the shaders, like right out of the box, like StereoKit does use a physically based rendering pipeline. So it's very familiar to anybody who's done work with 3D modeling in recent times, but it's tuned for mobile performance. Like by default, works really well on mobile, super fast. Like you don't have to feel guilty about using these shaders. The other thing that StereoKit does is it uses kind of a simplified lighting system. So instead of doing like a really complex stuff with like shadows, dynamic lights, or whatever, like StereoKit basically boils it down into what do you need to make an application look good, and how do you prevent people from shooting themselves in the foot? Like if you stuck like 5 dynamic lights in a scene in a HoloLens application, like you're gonna suffer. Like maybe it'll look cool, but you're gonna suffer. You just don't really work with lots of lights. Lights get expensive really fast. And so StereoKit uses something called spherical harmonics. It basically bakes all of your lighting into this single mathematical construct that is very fast to sample and look at. So like in this case, I'm baking down a couple of different colored light sources into a single mathematical construct, and then everything in that environment uses that one mathematical construct. And like this is an example of creating one manually, but you can also pull one from a cube map. This is probably the most common way to do it. Like just grab a cube map of an environment, and it'll extract lighting information from that cube map, which is really great. One thing, like in the past, I've also worked on the mixed reality lighting tools. And so this is also something that I'm kind of looking forward to implementing in StereoKit, is basically like taking photos of the environment you're in and replicating your environment's lighting upon the holograms. Soon, should be around the corner. But yeah, basically all of StereoKit's rendering is based around this concept of like, it should work well on mobile, it should do it by default, and you're not going to have to worry about performance. So how do you get started? If that was interesting to you, and hopefully it was interesting, what do you do to get started? So I've tried to make this as simple as possible, and I think I've done relatively well with it. So StereoKit is basically a Visual Studio native thing. So if you work with Visual Studio, you should already be very comfortable with it. Basically, there's a template up on the Visual Studio Marketplace. You download that template, and that'll give you 2 different projects that you can use within Visual Studio, like a .NET Core or UWP project. And you can just create one of those. It gives you everything that you need to get started, and you can go. Like, it's great. Alternatively, if you want to just grab the NuGet package and wade through it yourself, you can do that too. But the template is by far the easiest way to get started with StereoKit. There is also a GitHub repository. StereoKit is 100% open source. It is MIT licensed. So if you want to go build it yourself or modify it or whatever, like it's there for you to do it. I don't recommend doing this as your introduction to StereoKit. The template is a much, much better way to get started. If you're interested in like building StereoKit, there are some instructions, but it's a little bit more of an investment. Like you're basically building the SDK from scratch at that point, and that's a little more work. But there are a lot of really great examples and resources in the repository, so it's nice to dig through and see what's around to help out your development experience. Although a lot of that stuff you can also find in the documentation. The best places to look for resources, though, StereoKit.net. This is the documentation website. So all of the docs, the getting started guides, all of that fun stuff is up there on StereoKit.net. And then the first real big sample that I would look at is the StereoKit tutorial. This is StereoKit Inc. And it is a pretty good introduction into like how to use StereoKit to build some user interface, create some interactions with like hand tracking and stuff like that. And so it's a really good one to look at. It's 300 lines of code separated across 3 different files, and it's heavily commented, lots and lots of comments. So everything in there is explained really well. And so that's that's all that I've got for you with this presentation. You can always follow development on Twitter. I'm Kojaku there. Website for StereoKit is over here. And yeah, that's a tutorial. StereoKit hack. This is something that's going on. It's almost over. There's maybe about a little less than a week left. But there is a StereoKit hackathon that's going on, and you can always poke in there to try it out. Still a little bit of an opportunity to do that. There's also some cash prizes for that. It's like 3,000 for first place and stuff like that. So if you have the time and you're interested, this is kind of cool. It's a good excuse to go check it out and see if you can make something neat. So yeah, for there, I'm going to leave it at that. And if any of you have questions, I will be happy to answer them.
Well, thanks, Nick. Do you want to talk a little bit more? We still have time. Do you want to talk a little bit more about this hackathon that you mentioned?
Yeah. So the hackathon, like the nice thing about this is it's really just kind of an open hackathon. Like you can build whatever you want so long as it's with StereoKit. We've got, the primary purpose of it is, like I've been working on this for 2 years. I've like good, strong community of people, but I'm really kind of looking to start scaling this up. We're approaching a 1.0 launch, and I want feedback, see how people interact with it, what their experiences are, what they think may need improved, or how to make it better, holes in the documentation. So the hackathon is mostly about like, what do you think of it? I want to know. So it's pretty relaxed, nothing super strict. You could basically pop in, fudge around, and enjoy yourself, submit something, and I'd learn. Maybe you'd have a chance of winning. It'd be cool.
Yeah, I think that those events are really interesting to get our community and to bring more developers to the platform. But one interesting thing that we have at StereoKit is that since it's more easier to use, I think that more people will come to develop more. What do you think about that? I think that we have one of the problems that we have today is that from some people who doesn't understand a lot of developments and Unity and Unreal or something like this, it's really hard to get onto this. And on the other hand, we have this problem that we need more content to make it easier and to make people use it even more. So I think that StereoKit comes in this way to help this, to develop more content. I want to develop one prototype. Okay, let's get into this and develop a quick prototype and do it on StereoKit.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like as somebody who came from teaching, I really wish I had StereoKit in my toolkit back then, because I would love to teach with StereoKit. It would be such a good tool for learning on. Yeah, I think a lot of our development tools have kind of gotten a little stale. Like one of the interesting things that I've noticed is that everybody right now is a Unity developer. Like everywhere I go, and it's kind of the only option that people really have in a lot of cases. Like it's why, like, it's a good tool. It does a lot of great stuff. It's a big kitchen sink full of fantastic things. But at the same time, that also means that like they don't necessarily have as much competitive pressure, or their kitchen sink may be a little complicated to fiddle around in. And so StereoKit, because of its laser focus on mixed reality, it's a lot easier to approach. It should be much, much better for creating stuff that's mixed reality focused. And yeah, just a smaller developments, like smaller API surface, way easier to learn. Just the focus on like this code first API. Yeah.
Yeah, and mainly for newcomers. For example, if you open Unity, you have a lot of options, a lot of things to do, a lot of windows and information to smarts to begin to work. If we could present and have something easier and faster to just do the first experiences, I think it could be easier to even in schools, for example, to try to put it in schools for kids and something like this is going to be easier for that.
One of my big metrics is what does it take to get to Hello Cube on a HoloLens. And like this is a super important thing. Like, how long does it take you from like the zero setup to seeing a cube in mixed reality? And StereoKit, it's ridiculously fast. Like I've tried doing a video on it, and I was like, this isn't even worth making a video about. Like, it's so quick and short. So like, I think I've done a good job there. And like, from what I've seen in the community and the way people have talked about it, like, I feel like I've done a pretty good job about making StereoKit easy to use, easy to get started. A lot of people really do love using it so far. So it's been really great to hear that.
Yeah, that's nice. Let's spread the word about this. Let's take more users to do their experiences on that, and that's it. Well, thank you very much, Nick, for your time. Thank you for experiencing and sharing your knowledge about this. This is a great tool. I hope that people can take most advantage of this. Please, if you're watching this, go to the Twitter account that he mentioned to see the info, follow the GitHub and all the information that he mentioned here, so you can start to develop on StereoKit. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for hosting me, and thanks everybody for watching.
Yeah, that's it. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.